Hello and welcome once again to Rasslin Memories Then and Now on Pioneer 90.1 KSRQ. We're available worldwide to the masses outside of the FM dial. You can check us out at radionorthland.org. Stream the audio right now, or if you missed this episode for whatever reason on this fine weekend, fall is a nice time of year, you can check out replays of this episode at our website, radionorthland.org. Go to the Rasslin Memories page. It will link you up to our Radio Northland SoundCloud page and over 6 years of Rasslin Memories Then and Now interviews. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And you can pick up that app, TuneIn, for your smartphone. Oh, take us everywhere. You get decent cell phone reception. Well, I'm Glen Braget, along with my man down there deep in the heart of Texas, sitting in his mobile studio. I guess when it gets to be this time of year, as we're kind of heading into the fall months, I bet it gets a little bit better down there for you, my grizzled veteran Michael McCurdy.
Down in the 70s, man. It gets down to the 70s in the fall. It's great. Right now it's about 85, so I'm not complaining. No 110, no 115. So.
Yeah, we went through a summer, and let's just say maybe a good chunk of the spring when we've been doing these shows. We've heard you in some almost dire situations there. I was like, man, did you crack the window at least?
I got all the windows down, man. We're good to go.
Yeah,
and like I told Kenny Bolin, I'm not on the side of the road on the interstate. So.
Okay, so now you've gotten that established, or maybe you're just throwing a swerve up my way. But anyway, it's good to have you here. Rasslin Memories Then and Now. Facebook page, check that out. Social media, we're starting to do our thing. The group page, the main page, it's all good in social media land, right, Mr. McCurdy?
Oh, it's going great in social media. We're at about 1,000 followers, both pages. Twitter and Instagram are about to start. They're coming up a little bit. Got a few followers there. Blog page going live soon. Another way for people to get their wrestling memories from us. So, we're going into the social media world, man. So,
absolutely,
another way to take the show on to the next level.
And my friend, you have done some, we've been kind of going back and forth with some pretty fun guests here on Rasslin Memories the last few weeks. Just you booking some too, I'm booking too. And now it falls on this week, and it looks like you, my friend, have booked, oh man, I was a fan of this gentleman when he was in the World Wrestling Federation, WWE. I also remember him back at the last days of ECW. Back before Heyman basically shut the doors on that. I always thought he had some great promise. Always loved the White Boy Challenge. Man, you have got one of my favorites today, Mr. McCurdy.
Man, I've always been a fan as well. Like you said, ECW, WWE. And I've actually had a chance to work a few shows with this gentleman. So, great guy. I'm looking forward to this interview. So, Glenn, why don't you go ahead, man? Let's make the introduction, and let's get this interview going.
Let me tell you something. It's been a while since we heard somebody say, hey, everybody, why don't we back the Mac? I want to talk about this as a man who brought Thuggin' and Buggin' Productions some great fame and also great acclaim. He's a tough guy. He's nobody's fool. He is Mr. Rodney Mack, the Red Dog, the Big Dog. He's just the main event, and he's here today on Rasslin Memories. How are you doing today, Mr. Rodney Mack?
Good, and thank you guys for having me, man. It's been a while, Mike. It's good to hear from you, man, and it's always a pleasure.
Oh, absolutely! It's wonderful to have you on.
You, Rodney.
Well, we got a lot to talk about here. Again, Mike was so gracious, and you were so gracious to take his request and be on the program today. Lots of great career highlights we can go through, but I want to talk a little bit about Mike, how you kind of got and found Rodney. I mean, down in the Independence, down there in the southern part of the United States, because you've had a chance to actually see him in person and meet the man, watch the man do his thing.
Not only have I had a chance to see this man work in the ring, I also got knocked on my butt during a show one time by this man. I will tell you, you learn when you get knocked on your butt by the Red Dog.
Is this another one of them beatdown challenges, or was this one of them spontaneous challenges?
This was me not listening when he told me to put the camera down is what this was. So you're basically, this was not Mr. Mack's fault. He was merely trying to get you to kindly get rid of that camera, get out of the way. And Mr. Grizzle veteran Mike McCurdy, I don't know. You're my partner and all, but you can't be doing that to Rodney Mack. Well, every once in a while I cross the line a little bit. Got to do what you got to do to get the scoop from the talent. So and that's kind of what that case was. But
right. trying to get a better angle with the camera.
There we go, better angle for the camera. I believe that angle was straight up when I was lying on my backside, but.
Wow, we're going to get into talking about some of the stuff you're up to these days, but of course, with Rasslin Memories, we love to share, and Rasslin Memories Then and Now, we love to share the old memories. We want to really get to know you, Rodney Mack, and reacquaint some of the people who may remember you, whether it would be in the WWE or working for ECW or just following through the independents, as well as your wife, Jazz, who's a double tough customer herself in the pro wrestling ring. I want to talk about wrestling for you. Was it something growing up that you gravitated towards? Did you watch wrestling when you were a kid? What were some of the things that led you to pro wrestling? Like I said, did it start when you were younger? Just tell us about your pro wrestling journey.
Yes, most definitely. It was something I always just knew that, it's one of those things I just knew that sometime point in life that I was going to be a professional wrestler. As far as I can remember back, I remember sitting up watching wrestling with my father. It was a family thing growing up in southern Louisiana, Lafayette to be exact. We would sit down and watch, the Mid-South at the time. I can remember, as far back as I was 3 or 4 years old, sitting up watching wrestling with my father on Saturday mornings. And I tell this story all the time when I talk about this. My brother is 4 years younger than I am, and I was 4 years old, and I remember my mother going into labor, and we dropped her off to the hospital and had my brother while we went and attended to watch a match with Andre the Giant versus two, it was a handicap match at a local football stadium.
Well, it was Andre the freaking Giant. I know Sibling Can Wait. I mean, this is back in the day when you had Andre traveling in.
The thing, he didn't wait, but needless to say, I tried.
You put your best, but the effort was put in at least. But getting to see those wrestlers, though, I mean, but the guys that you watched on the TV, I mean, it blew my mind the first time I got to go see a live event when I was a kid, because it was just everything seemed so larger than life, and especially in your case, you lived down in such a hot area with Mid-South down in Louisiana and the states surrounding. I mean, you had great television. Pro wrestling in those days was just such a wonderful thing too in the territories, because you did get guys to come in and out of the territories like guest appearances or short runs. So, having a hotbed of wrestling like that too, like Bill Watts Mid-South, geez, talk about being in wrestling heaven. I'm up here in AWA country, but man, I envy your Mid-South experiences.
Right. And that's the other, as well, we grew up watching NWA as well. That was the other, wrestling program we watched. Yeah. So I was always, man, just a big fan of pro wrestling, and it was part of our culture in Louisiana. You wanted to play football or you wanted to be a professional wrestler, and it's always been there for me. The fire was easy. It was easy for me to keep the fire lit. It was always around me, and like I said, I just had a great upbringing. In those years and those days of watching professional wrestling, and also I'm blessed that my father was always there with me and took me to every show that we could find.
Mm-hmm. In my case, my dad was working, but it was my mom and my grandma, and I had a grandma always claimed that she was never watching it, but every once in a while when we used to watch it at home, you would see her moving and squirming and yelling and cursing. All of a sudden, I'm like, Grandma, I thought you weren't watching this. I thought this was just something you put your thumb, your nose at too. But that's also part of that pro wrestling experience too, with having those memories, whether it be with a parent or a grandparent.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
And talking about Mid-South, and you want to talk about how big pro wrestling was in the state of Louisiana, one of the real driving forces in Mid-South for a better part of the later part of the 1970s and into the early to mid 80s was the phenomenon of the junkyard dog. I mean, people nowadays wouldn't believe it, but you had to ask some people who lived in the times just how big and how important junkyard dog was in that part of the country. I mean, Junkyard Dog, JYD, was probably at sometimes even bigger than the football team, the Saints. But then at that time, the Saints weren't exactly putting out winning seasons. But you get me on that when I'm saying that Junkyard Dog was just such a big, all-encompassing phenomenon for a time down there.
Right. He was and still is to this day. If you mention wrestling, people, young and old, and it's crazy, but I don't know how young kids, would know who Junkyard Dog is, but they still do. I guess because because of the internet or whatnot. But his name is still alive today, and he was something. I mean, of course, I had the honor and the privilege of him being my uncle and being trained by JYD. But I hate saying it from this point of view, but everyone felt the same way about it. I mean, he was just, you can't find anyone who say anything bad about it. I mean, he was just a great guy, not to mention his talent.
Mm-hmm. And you had an opportunity to, before he passed away, to get some sort of training with him. Is that from what I've read, or is that an incorrect? Tell us what your connection was in regards to getting yourself trained up for pro wrestling. Was Junkyard a part of that? Because I've been hearing things. I just wanted to get it from you.
Right. Well, he was more than a part. Yeah, he was the start of that. Right. Dog was the guy that actually started training and broke me into, introduced me into the business, and that is also where I met Jazz, and from there, shortly, after training with Dog for a short period of time, that instant, of course, his death was with the tragic, the wreck and whatnot, and then after that, I picked up with Rod Price, and continued. Jazz and I both went with Rod Price and continued training with him. But JYD is the one that broke us in, and we were on the road together traveling.
What were some of the things that you picked up from him as far as not only just the training, but just you said you traveled with him to events and stuff? What did you learn from JYD? Because there's a lot of things you can glean by just getting in a car ride with somebody or just picking up little nuances aside from the training that you did receive.
Right, of course, the car rides, it's always business. That's one thing we learned, not to mention in the ring, but we learned more about the business itself and how to handle ourselves, conduct ourselves, and make money in the business. That's Dog talked to us, and that's what he really emphasized more on towards us. He always told me and Jazz that, especially me because of my wrestling background, which would really annoy me because I was so lost at the time. And he would go, Rodney, he already know how to wrestle, and I'd be like, man, what are you talking about? I'm an amateur wrestler, but anyway, he had always spoke fun about me. His training with me wasn't that much physical; it was more mental, and vice versa with Rod Price. Rod Price was more hands-on with me in the ring and showed me the physical aspect of it. But Dog was quite a treat, man. And once again, how he handled himself and conducted business in public, not wrestling business, just the way he conducted himself in general. He was all that, man.
Mm-hmm. And it was just a terrible, unfortunate incident that we lost him 20 or so years ago now. It's been, it was just the contribution that he put in pro wrestling. And I mean, he had his fame to a degree in the WWF, but it was never quite the same as when he was running down in Mid-South as far as just the way he could grab the fan. I mean, he was popular in the WWF, don't get me wrong, but it just wasn't that same sort of organic feeling that he developed down there in Louisiana and the Mid-South territory.
Right, you're right. Yeah. He was a little bit past his, I guess, his prime then, or whatnot. But again, he had. Well, I don't know. It's hard to say.
I want to also talk about your training now with Rod Price and Rod's getting you prepared. What was going through your mind? Can you remember those first couple of matches you had? Now you've been tailored in different ways of training by Junkyard Dog, and now with Rod Price. What can you remember of getting ready to get into the ring and those first few matches? Just what was that feeling like to finally be able to put all of this stuff that you've learned to try to apply it and kind of learn things as you go?
Well, with that being said, my training was not that extensive. In other words, I didn't really train that long before I was kind of thrown into the fire. So Rod, of course, thought I was prepared because he would have never put me, in those situations. Because he was too much of a professional to do that. But it was very nerve-wracking. It was, I was very, it's hard to explain because I'm the type of person that I try to be a perfectionist. So I never think that I'm really, completely ready or over-prepared or, I'm not that type of guy. I always, try to be an overachiever and work harder than the next guy. So it was very hard for me to believe that I was actually ready to have a match, and whether I was or not, he was pretty damn good at convincing me. So, but it was very nerve-wracking because Rod comes from the the Texas background with the guys from World Class, and so when I got with Rod and we come up here down here to Texas, I was facing guys like Terry Gordy, who was still, in the game, Sam Houston, of course Sam was up there in Louisiana as well, but Iceman, King Parsons, Action Jackson, Brian Adias was still there, and you guys know that, it was like kind of over the top for me, but of course, once again, it was a great challenge, and I'm very blessed that I was in that situation, kind of thrown into the fan.
So when's that feeling? When do you get that feeling like that? You can kind of hang with these guys after you start kind of getting yourself going, getting those calluses built up, learning the knowledge of the ring. But when did you start to feel more comfortable? You're never completely comfortable. You always got to have a little bit of excitement. But when did you feel like you were a little more at home in the ring?
To be honest with you, it didn't take me long at all, and I want to make that clear. I'm by any means not bragging or boasting or think that I'm good by any means. I was just pretty much a natural at the psychology and just getting it. Because once again, not only did I train with those guys, but I wrestled throughout my whole entire life from, I guess, the time I was 6 years old to, I guess I was about 26 when I started actually pro wrestling. But so I knew how to wrestle, but it just, Rod used to always tell me that I had the it factor as far as for ring presence. Even being a ring general and not even knowing what a ring general was, ring awareness, kind of, those things. Of course, I wasn't just great at it, but you could see signs and traces of that, and also having the talent and ability to sell. I kept, they would tell me that I was a great seller, and I had no idea what the hell they were talking about, but I just went with the flow, Mm-hmm. But so it didn't take me that long, and at the same time, I understood that I was in the ring with the guys I told you, with Iceman and guys like Terry Gordy and all those great guys. So of course they carried me to a certain extent. So so once again, I was blessed to be in the ring with those guys, and then the whole time, I don't know if I could actually remember or give you a recap of those matches because I was so starstruck. Here it is. I went from watching these guys and wanting to be one of these guys to shit on the same card with these guys. And I'm like mesmerized in the locker room. You look here, and here's Akbar, and you got One Man Gang and Kamala. And then over here, you got Terry Gordon, you got, Michael Hayes, and I was like, geez. So
what was that? What was it like for you to approach these gentlemen? I mean, not only you're working in the ring, but you get to kind of establish some sort of rapport in the locker room. What was that like for you? I mean, to kind of like make that transition, man, from being that fan to like, holy crap, that's your Iceman Parsons.
It was real easy for me because I was taught that you sit down and shut the hell up. That's not what the words they told me, but when you walk in the locker room, you sit down. Where you go, you tell everyone hello, you shake hands, and sit down and shut the hell up and speak when spoken to. So that was real easy. Half of the times when you're green, you walk around and say hello and shake hands, and they're holding a conversation anyway, and they didn't even pay attention to me. So, so it was real easy. I just go sit down and shut the hell up and then, watch.
Oh, right on. This is Rasslin Memories Then and Now. I'm Glen Braget along with the grizzled veteran Michael McCurdy with our special guest, Mr. Rodney Mack. And I'm going to bring Mr. McCurdy into the conversation here so he can fire off a few more questions for you, Rodney. Mike, you ready to roll, my friend?
I'm always ready to roll, man. You know what, Rodney? That list of just men you got a chance to work in the ring with is absolutely amazing. I mean, those names are so legendary here in Texas. In fact, as we're recording this right now, my 7-year-old son is sitting in front of the TV watching Terry Von Erich versus Ric Flair from 1982, which was the start of, we all know, the Von Erich and Freebird feud. So, I'm making sure I raised the boy up right.
There you go, man. There you go.
But one thing I want to get into, Rodney, you also got a chance to, after, cutting your teeth, getting your debut in and going around the locker room, you got a chance to go to ECW. ECW at that time, last couple years run, you were part of the Baldies, but ECW was the promotion at that time. It was an independent, but it wasn't an independent. ECW was, we all know, legendary. Everybody remembers ECW. Can we talk a little bit just about that, about the environment, about working with Paul Heyman, and just getting to be a part of Extreme Championship Wrestling?
Oh, yeah, that was a whole different horse to ride right there, my friend. That was a whole different thing. It was a culture shock moving up to Philly, moving up to New York, and just being around that atmosphere and the boys and the style of wrestling was just totally, as we know, it was just out there. And as far as for training wise or rules or whatnot, it's like everything that you learned was thrown out the window in ECW. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It was just a style of its own. It was hard for me, man, because I had it rough coming up, and it's no secret. I mean, it's been a long time. It's no secret at all. Everyone, I felt, not everyone, but the majority of those guys hated on me for whatever reason it was. And that's my version. Of course, you'll ask them, and they were, oh no, Rodney was a great guy, this, that, yeah, but it is what it is. Bottom line is, it took me a year and a half or something like that, or a year to get a tryout. When every other time Dick and Harry could have just pulled up there with their bag and then knock on the door and get a tryout. Now, why, I have no idea, but whatever. But yeah, it was real tough for me. I had to work Atlas, and I'm not whining or bitching all the time. I'm just keeping it real. It was a lot harder on me than it were on they were harder on me than it were on anybody else. And I thank them for that, because I invite that. I love that kind of stuff. And I remember calling my dad, and he asked me how was things going, and I was real pissed off that night. And I just remember telling him that no matter how hard they tried, that they couldn't break me. But yeah, it was a difficult time for more reasons than one. Like I said, I don't know, man, what it was. It was personal issues that they had against me. But when I finally did break the mold and get a chance to wrestle there, things skyrocketed for me. And matter of fact, I don't mind telling you how I got a break because of there was a pay-per-view in L.A. and Jazz asked me to fly up there with her and just to come accompany her. So I did. And long story short, there was a fight that broke out, and I was one of the guys that went out there, and I was one of the first guys to run out there along with Jack Victory's crippled self, and we hobbled out there and started mixing it up in the parking lot. And well, I say that to say this: I'm a guy. I'm one of the first guys that went up to bat and fight for ECW, and I had not, ever received a tryout or anything. But I was just that kind of a team player. So anyway, I went out there and knocked out about 5 or 6 guys, and on the way back in, Paulie stops me and hugs me, and he and I became like best friends there. And he told me that he would never forget what I did for him and stepped up for the company, the way I stepped up for the company. And from then on out is kind of how it started for me. So I started getting a few matches here and there, and I went from, of course, opening up the card to being pretty high on the card, like real fast. Things were going really good for me. And, of course, we know the end. Paulie ended up selling the company and whatnot. But right before then, I had started really feeling myself and finding myself, and was on a pretty good road.
Now, what was it like working for just Paul Heyman, just the man himself? Because, considered to be probably one of the best wrestling minds out there, still going strong now, as the advocate with Brock Lesnar. But what was it like working with Paul Heyman?
Oh, it was man, great experience. I love Paul, and Paul and I and Jazz have a great relationship. He is a genius, and he is, man, I don't know, I can go on, and it all be good about him in this business and just working alongside of him. He's a mastermind. He's brilliant. He's 2 steps ahead of you, and he knows you, meaning his talent. He knows you inside and out. He knows how you walk, how you talk, and how you think. I mean, he's all that, man, and I'm very blessed to have been, around a guy like that and been tutored and taken under the wing by someone, of that caliber.
What was it like towards the end there? Because as you said, you were there the last couple of years of ECW. What was the environment like as it got towards the end? Because we've all heard the stories about, guys weren't getting paid, bills weren't getting paid. I believe Paul was already working with WWE, but nobody knew it at the time. What was the environment like with ECW towards the end?
Well, it went from being real fun to, we all knew that, the end was coming, because, a lot of people, it started off with the checks bouncing and, people losing, a lot, losing everything, their homes, and, and it just dwindled from down there. The morale was gone, and guys started getting signed left and right. But at the same time, the young guys, and that's one thing I can see, always about ECW, the young guns always were hungry, and they would always pull the load, so it didn't matter who was on that roster or who you saw coming down that aisle. You were going to get your money's worth, and you were going to get an ECW product. So, we did lose a lot of the big talent, but the guys that did walk down that ramp, they gave it their all, man. So, it was a great experience to even though it was, that was bad, it was a good thing to have went through such a rough time with our brothers and still survive, so to speak, because going through something like that made a bunch of us, those that stayed, tougher and understand, that's part of the business.
Now, her name's come up a couple times already in this interview, and at one point she was actually scheduled to kind of be a part of this, and hopefully we'll get to talk to her sometime down the road. But can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Jazz? How did you guys meet, and what's it like kind of getting to work? Well, you eventually got married, you work with your wife, you guys are still wrestling. So, how did you meet Jazz, and just how was that working as with the marriage and all that as part in the wrestling world? 'Cause sometimes wrestling can be tough on something like that.
Right. Well, me and Jazz and I met through training with JYD. I met her through Dog. Actually, I'd come off of work late at night, and it'd be about 10 o'clock at night when I get off of work. And then I'd go knock at JYD's apartment, which Jazz was rooming with Dog at the time, and she had a job, I forget at some little restaurant throughout the day. But I would go, at about 10 o'clock at night and knock on Dog's door just to sit down and talk wrestling. But also he had the key to a gym, so I would go and get the key and go and work out. So Dog told me one morning, he just told me, I'd like for you to meet this girl, Jazz, who come down from Memphis. The train. So we did. Jazz and I hooked up and went to the gym, and like I said, I'd come back at night and get her at 10 o'clock at night. She'd be in bed sleeping, and I'd come and knock, and I'd be like, oh, I guess I missed her. And JYD would be like, oh, no, Red Dog, don't you go nowhere. And he'd go, J-Dog, get up. He used to call Jazz J-Dog, and he'd go and shake her up in the bed, wake her up. And Jazz had probably just gotten to bed about a good hour or so, but we get her up and we go to the gym and work out for about 2 hours and come on back in. So it was that's what kind of, I was attracted first to Jazz as a friend and a teammate, because understand, I just got out of playing college football and I was a gung ho and all American knows. So I was crazy, and I was all about getting about handling business and practice. So anyway, Jazz, all throughout football, in high school and whatnot, in college, I've never really had a partner that would stick with me for too long in a workout, because I work out all day. But Jazz was one of the only ones that would continue to come back after we worked out, because we train on the weights for about an hour and a half, and then we roll in the ring and do about another hour and a half. So it's about 2 o'clock in the morning before we actually leave the gym, and she never missed a day. And when we did get a chance to train with the rest of the guys, she would, outshow the guys. Like I teach her some wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling stuff, because it would only be her and I late that night in the gym, and then we come that Saturday or Sunday to train with the rest of the guys, and she would eat everybody up. And I was like, oh my God, So that's what kind of attracted me to her. She was a natural for learning Greco-Roman wrestling. I remember, at those times, like I said, it was only her and I in the gym, so I didn't know anything else to teach her but what I knew, and that was Greco-Roman wrestling. So, and I remember when I saw her catching on that fast, I told her, I sat there in the ring and said, I'm telling you, you would be one of the best that I said these words, you will be the greatest woman wrestler of all time. And she laughed at me, of course. And she's like, man, you're crazy, you're tripping. I'm like, I've never seen a woman, long as I've been living in the research I have done, to do Greco-Roman wrestling in the ring. I've never seen that. And if you'd have seen Jazz practice and train and the athlete she was, you'd understand where I was coming from, because she was a natural and she had a knack for this. But anyway, needless to say, she was eating up all the guys that was coming up through practice, and it didn't take her long at all. But that's what attracted me to her and how we got hooked up, because after about a month or so, Jazz and I were the only ones to graduate the school, or to finish, I don't say graduate, to finish the school and go on, to start wrestling.
All right, I'm going to pass the microphone over to Glen. Glen, I'm sure you got a couple more questions for our guest tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get back into this conversation with Rodney Mack on Rasslin Memories Then and Now. I want to talk a little bit about, now we've already gotten to the point where ECW is shut down. Now, of course, that was just a big, I don't know, is this one of many shots fired in the next couple of months with ECW shutting down and WCW shutting down. What did you feel like, and for you to know that these companies have started to shut down or were showing signs of fading away, and how did you get yourself involved in what was eventually into the WWE with the OVW promotion? Just talk about those days after ECW closed, what you and Jazz were looking for options wise.
Right. Well, I think afterwards we stayed in touch with Paulie, and Paulie had a little bit to do with that, or actually a lot to do with that, with helping us up. Of course, we helped ourselves by staying, doing the things that we needed to do by continuing to work and, do research and whatnot and send in film. And that's where it was. We would send in film, and also at the time, we had guys like Paulie there and who spoke up for us. So that's basically how that went. And then, of course, Jazz got the call, and she went to OVW first. And, I was still doing the independent thing, and I was still content, happy, and just, just loving wrestling, of course. She called me and wanted me to go up there, and I turned her down a couple of times. I didn't really want to go because I was working and doing real well where I was. I was satisfied. But anyway, she got me to go up to OVW, and, man, I got to meet with Jim Cornette and Danny Davis, and they gave me a look. Once it took me about, I guess, 5-6 weeks or so before I started working. Got a little tryout, whatnot, because it was, I think at the time, it was toward the holidays, and they were wrapping up the hangers. But, I got a chance to, sit down and talk to Jim Cornette and Danny Davis and a few other guys that were there. I think Dr. Tom Pritchard. And, they gave me a shot, and, one thing led to another. And, that was another great experience working with those guys, with Jim Cornette and Danny Davis and that group.
You're finding the right woods and the right learning trees to sit under in your career as far as, you had the talent and the goods, but you had such good luck and good fortune to be able to sit under the tree of guys like Jim Cornette and Nightmare Danny Davis and guys who have come in during your run at OVW, whether it's a trainer or somebody to help you with your mic skills, just little things like that to kind of help you get on your way.
That's right, man. That means everything. When you're learning, when you have guys like that surrounding you, how can't you get better? It's almost impossible.
Now you were able to team up with. Oh, I'm sorry. You were able to team up with Shelton Benjamin. I was just going to mention, and another guy with amazing talent who came from the amateur wrestling world. What was it like to team up with a guy like Shelton, who he kind of reminded me? I'm a little bit like Kurt Angle, and maybe to a degree the way you got kind of were like a fish to water as far as learning and picking up the pro wrestling. Especially making that transition from being a champion college amateur like Shelton was.
Right. Well. I want to say this. I've been around a lot of not good, but I want to say great athletes in my time before I met Shelton. And guys from the NFL, that's in the NBA, from the track and field. Top-notch guys. But Shelton would always stick out in my mind as probably one of the greatest athletes I had ever had the privilege of meeting and being a part of. I can't say enough good things about him. He's a great guy, but more, he's a superhuman being, nicest guy in the world, and his talent is second, only to that.
Now, when did you get called up to work some matches up to the big show? And did you feel kind of, I don't know, is there just a part of you that, wishes that you could have had, you and Shelton would have been called up to the main roster as the tag team that you guys had done so much work in the OVW? But just talk about getting called up and some of your feelings going in to up to the big show. Basically, you went through your finishing school here in OVW. Now you're up into the WWF, WWE.
Right. No, it didn't really, sure, that would have been great because all the guys that worked together in OVW, we had a bond, we were family, we had camaraderie, and, it was there, we were all brothers, and sure, working as his tag team partner, we were just a little extra, special, but it didn't hurt my feelings because we were all always behind each other and always want to see each other succeed. So when one guy got called up, we were happy for him. And again, when I got called up, I was lucky again, fortunate because of my situation. Because of the spot I was thrown in. I was told that I'd be working with Paul Lee, and Paul Lee did help, once again groom me before I even hit TV when I was doing the house shows. I had a chance to work with Jazz some, but Paul Lee would set up TV, little spots in the back, where we would shoot promos and practice and work on stuff, even though we didn't have nothing to do that night. He found stuff for me to do. And I was one of the only guys, I was the only guy that he did that with, me and Jazz. So I was real lucky, to to have that opportunity. But it happened kind of fast for me. I think they kind of had something in the making for me already. But I did a few house shows, and then I got put in a position with John Cena. Cena and I, that's another thing I should be. Cena and I tagged before that, when I was on SmackDown, when I first came there. And Cena and OVW, Cena and I worked against each other, like, just about every night. And then it was ironic, when we got to WWE, they tagged us together, but we hit off. I mean, we hit off really well. I had a great time with him. We worked against the Guerreros, against Charlie Haas and Sheldon and Kurt Angle, and in them days. So man, it was awesome. I had a great time with those guys and learned so much. With Benoit and Guerrero and those guys, Eddie. So man, I don't know. It was awesome. And then again, after that transition, I got called in to do the deal with Teddy Long.
Mm-hmm. And that's when the Red Dog became Rodney Mack, because for leading up to this, you were your old handle of Red Dog. And yeah, you moved in. You went from working alongside John Cena in the early days of the Doctor of the Thugonomics gimmick to working with Teddy Long on Monday Night Raw, the Thuggin' and Buggin' Enterprises. I think that's what I can remember it. I enjoyed Teddy Long when Teddy Long was a heel, and I really liked some of the work that you did with him. What was it like to work with Teddy Long? I mean, this is a guy that has just boundless energy, and a guy that I can remember back into 1985, 1984, when I used to watch Superstation Wrestling. He used to be at the TV studio, whether it was grabbing jackets or becoming a referee. So this was a guy, another hard-working guy that finally he earned every bit of his time on the camera side of things for the WWF and the NWA.
That's right. But you just said it all, man. That just described Teddy. It was so great with him because he was what a manager's supposed to do. He's the epitome of what a manager is. I mean, I had to do nothing but show up, work, just handle myself, go to the gym, work out, and show up the rest. And Teddy took care of everything for me. He handled everything on the road that was to handle. And like you say, he was a bundle of energy, always a joy to be around. And I learned so much from him, from his stories on the road, which I probably couldn't tell you one of them because he had me laughing so much. He's such a character. He's a good guy. But, he taught me so much about the ring, in the ring, outside the ring, how to handle myself. And, he's just an all-around great guy. And he had a chance to work with so many greats in the business, So I was just blessed, man. And I always feel that way. I'm blessed, because of the road that I've traveled in the business. I've been very fortunate to be around guys like that.
And you also, during that run with Teddy, you ended up working and tagging with a guy whose pro wrestling career was unfortunately cut short due to the multiple concussions that he had. And this was a guy that ended up, after leaving professional wrestling, to become a big, major advocate and in talking about sports concussions of any kind. And of course, there's been a lot of connections in the last few years with CTE, and he's one of the voices that kind of brought that to the forefront as well, just by advocating. I'm talking about Christopher Nowinski. Now, what do you remember working with Chris? Because this is a guy that had some pretty good mic skills, but the only thing that held him back was the injuries. This was a guy that really had a good head on his shoulders, but just, circumstances be what they may, had a short career. But what do you remember with working with Chris?
Man, he's another, can't say nothing bad about Chris. He's a great guy, man. On the road with Chris, he always tried to take care of us, was a funny guy, always had jokes, was a good guy. I'm actually the one that kind of spilled the beans on him. I saw him leaning up against the wall in the hallway one day, and he was looking, we always teased him about being white. He was really white. But that day he was really, really white. He was pale. And I looked at him, I was like, Chris, you all right? And he was like, no, man, I'll be fine. My head's just hurting. And I told him, I was like, dude, you look really bad. And so I went and told the trainers on him and had them check him out. And but man, he was real smart, very intelligent guy, and he was catching on real fast. It was very unfortunate, for him that it had to end that fast.
Yeah, with those
he
head
was
injuries.
he was special.
I want to talk also his replacement. You ended up tagging up with Mark Henry, the world's strongest man, who had just recently here got nominated into the WWE Hall of Fame. Mark Henry, of course, just a beast of a man. What was it like to work with Mark? I've heard some pretty positive things about Mark. But what do you remember? What was your story of working with Mark Henry, the world's strongest man?
Okay, know this: we never were hungry. We were never hungry. About every 2 exits, we stopped and got something to eat. But Mark was a super guy. Well, another one, man. We're talking about the world's strongest man. You can go on and on. Super, super nice, and everyone in the world knows that. Man, it was great being around. Mark knew every spot there was to hang out, to have fun, to eat, he's just a bundle of good times, man. And you can learn so much from Mark. He's a very, very intelligent guy, very educated, been around the world, and man, he can, he's more. I enjoy working out with him so much. He's always funny, man. Good sense of humor.
Oh, right. Right on. I'm going to bring Michael McCurdy back into the conversation as we're heading down the home stretch here for Rasslin Memories. Mike, I know you're waiting. You were so kind to let me ask a few questions. I'm going to throw the ball back to you, my friend.
All right. Well, Rodney, we'll talk a little bit about your indie career after you left WWE. But I do have a question once more while we're still on the WWE subject. Is who came up with and who presented you guys with was the White Boy Challenge? Because, I mean, a lot of us remember you in WWE. We remember the White Boy Challenge. Whose idea was it? And just kind of what was your opinion of it when you first heard about it?
Well, I mean, I was fine with it. I mean, I didn't mind anything that they would give me. I would have been happy with. But I think that was, from my understanding, members, well, that was Vince's baby. I think that was Vince's idea that he came up with. And Paulie put that bill on me. I think they were looking for a character to play that role. And Paulie, from my understanding, New Jack was the first guy that they, were going to use. But that didn't work out for whatever reason, and I have no idea. And then I got the call for it, and one thing led to another.
Now, this is the first I've ever heard of New Jack possibly being the, did you get a chance to work with him when you were in ECW?
Yes, I did, and I loved it. I traveled with New Jack a lot, man. New Jack took care of me, and he and I were like brothers. Yeah, I enjoyed New Jack. Taught me a lot.
All right, well, after you left, after WWE went there, you went back into the Indies. You and Jazz started Dirty South Wrestling, I believe it was. You kind of started your own indie group for a little bit.
Yeah.
Where did that come about, and how did that go?
That came, man. Actually, Jazz and I, we went back home, and we moved back home to open the gym and kind of gave back to the neighborhood. It was for I guess we kind of, it was kind of like a boys and girls club deal. We were kind of just giving back to the neighborhood, tutoring kids and whatnot. And we had a gym there, and we put a ring in there for our own personal use. And word got out that Jazz and I were back in town, and a bunch of the indie wrestlers around were looking for a place to work out. So we invited them to our, gym and let them use our facility. So, we got to helping them out, and one thing led to another. These guys, we ended up having like 40 independent workers that would come to the ring every night, and we ended up teaching them anyway, and they begged us to, open up a place for them to work. So that's how that kind of came about. We took a bunch of the guys that no one wanted or weren't quite properly trained or weren't finished trained or, whatever the reason was, and we started running shows with them, and it turned out pretty successful. We ran about 20 shows, I think it was, before we ended up having to move and relocate. But yeah, we sold out about 17 of the 20 shows. And still to this day now, we run periodically, but we just, of course, relocated back to Texas. And now we're going to open up a school real shortly here and kind of team up with a guy by the name of Ed Beckley, who runs the monster trucks. He ran the company, I'm sure you guys heard of it, BBOW, Bad Boys of Wrestling, a few years ago. And he's back into it again, running shows, and we're going to hook back up and start real shortly, probably by next month.
Now, you said you're back in the Texas area. Where about are you at?
San Antonio.
Okay, you're in San Antonio. I'm obviously Fort Worth. Now, coming back into this, you've gotten back in the indie scene. You said you were working with some of these guys and training and all that. So it's kind of come full circle for you. Do you find yourself teaching some of these new guys some of the lessons you learned from, Rod Price, JYD? Do you find yourself passing on the lessons that you learned?
All the time. I try not, and I tell them that, every time that I teach them something, I let them know this is not Rodney talking. This comes from such and such or such and such. And I always let them know that I can tell you something that I learned from each, one of the individuals. If we sat down and talked about Rod, I could give him, pinpoint something I learned about wrestling in a match from Rod, whether it be Rod, Tracy Smothers, it does Chris Adams. The list goes on and on. I remember certain things that those guys took their time out, and shared that with me. And yeah, there's probably thousands of guys that put their hands on me. And I can tell you each and every one of them, if you named them, he taught me the wrist lock. He taught me how to work the headlock better. He taught me this, that, the other. So, I try to do the same thing to them. And let them know that don't think this is my philosophy or my way of doing things. I do them because this is how it's done, or it's supposed to be done.
Now you're back in the independent scene, Texas, Louisiana, and all that. Independent scene here in Texas has grown immensely over the last few years. You've been a big part of it. You and I met, I believe, 2014 was when I first got a chance to meet you. And over the years, I think at one point in time you held 6 different titles. 3 of them being with the company I was with, the Triple Crown. But
at the time, yes, and really, I think at the time I had 15. I only traveled with 6 or 7 because I couldn't carry them all.
That's a lot of titles, my friend. But
yeah.
But you've had a chance to work with some of the young up and coming guys and all that, as well as WWE talent you worked with for. You had some stellar matches with Charlie Haas. I got to sit ringside I got to sit there and watch you and Charlie talk a few times in the locker room. And like you said, I just kind of sat down and shut up and, listen, because that's how you're going to learn. But, who are some of the guys that you've had a chance to work with lately on the independent scene that you think have that shot that might be the next guy you'll see in, NXT, TNA, WWE?
Well, I think you guys kind of already know this guy. I had a fortunate to work with this young guy, Brian Genesis, that I really have, that I'm high on. Of course, Raymond Rowe, because he's gone now. There's a guy also that goes by Odin. That's a Viking gimmick down in Louisiana as well. Yeah, there's there's a few guys out there. There's a lot of guys that have what it takes. It's just, are they willing to go that extra mile and do the little things? There's a bunch of guys that have nice bodies and can jump around and fly around and whatnot, but there's thousands of them out there. But how many of them, that are willing to go that extra mile and do the little things, like look at TV and learn to, I don't know, do research on your craft. You know what I mean? Go back and research things like holes and psychology and why to do certain things that you know that you're good at. Don't just do something because you can do it. There's a setup to doing stuff and why you do what you do when you do it. And you know that's the only thing holding back a bunch of guys. And we could go here and list names, but that you know I really don't want to do that because it gives some of them a big head, and I hate to do that and stop them. So, man, I see 3 or 4 guys that got their head screwed on real tight, and one of them, the top guy that I see out there, is Ryan Jensen. You know.
So, what have been some of the highlights for you now that you're back on the the independent scene? What have been some of the highlights for you as far as match-wise goes?
I'm sorry. Could you say that again?
Now that you're back on the independent scene, you get a chance to work with who you want to work with, and kind of work your own schedule. What have been some of the highlights for you as far as recent career?
Oh man, just being able to wrestle, doing what I love to do, and give back. You know, it doesn't matter who it is that I'm in there with or in the locker room with, and I've always been that guy. Even when I was in WWE or ECW, anytime the extra talent came around, I was always that guy to go sit in that locker room with those guys and just dress out with them and talk to them and you know, listen and scout out talent and see which guy is worth spending my time and giving advice to, and which guy that, you know, I let them know that, hey, stay away from this guy because, you know, he's bad news for you. But I just enjoy doing that. I love being a part of the business, and you know, I'm blessed that I can still physically get in there and wrestle. But just the part of me traveling, going around and kind of looking at other talent and hungry young guys wanting to make it, and me being able to give them a little piece of advice that may help them get there, that means a lot to me. And if I could close out the rest of my days doing that, I'd be more than happy.
Well, man, for myself, it's been glad to get a chance to sit and talk with you again. You know, we kind of haven't had a chance to talk in a while. In fact, I think the last time that I did see you was when you decided to put me on my butt in that parking lot at the in Crowley, Texas, back in 2016. So, but I'm going to hand it back over to Glenn if he's got any final questions and all before we wrap this show up today.
Well,
thanks again, Mike. It's good hearing from you, man, and I know I'll be seeing you sometime shortly, but.
All right. It looks like the timekeeper's giving me the old stink eye, which means we went to Broadway once again on Rasslin Memories Then and Now. I'm going to have to extend the invite once again for Mr. Rodney Mack. Maybe next time, can have Jazz with you, but the door is always open for either you or Jazz to come on the program anytime. We can get into a few different topics, some more career stuff from your time in the ring. But just thank you, for most of all, for taking time to chat and share some of those memories with us. It does mean a lot to me and Mike and the listeners.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me, man. And once again, I want to thank all the fans out there for all the time that and all the support that you guys have been backing us up for all these years. Much love to you, and keep on coming, man, because we're going to keep on giving it all to you.
Only a fool wouldn't back the Mac, man. Only a fool would decide to make that unwise decision. For Rodney Mack... Yeah, for Rodney Mack. What's that?
I said, believe that, player.
For Rodney Mack. Oh, yeah, the one-man attack and the grizzled vet, Mr. Michael McCurdy. This is Glen Braget, and you have been listening to Rasslin Memories Then and Now.